Claire Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, when I first saw this bill, and I sit on the Commerce Select Committee where this bill will come, and am looking forward to the discussions at Select Committee on this. But when I first saw the title of this bill and thought, what's this about? I felt a frisson of excitement that, no, not a croissant, a frisson. I felt a little bit excited that there was a plan, and that it was part of Simon Bridges was finally going to come good. He was going to come good because he talks a big game sometimes, and he gets very excited. This is probably electric vehicles is one of the things that he gets most excited about. I think James Shaw mentioned how many times he'd announced this. Not exactly this bill, but made the same announcement 8 times because I think it was just so exciting. But I thought that we're going to have a bit of a plan around energy innovation, and that the government's taking this seriously, that they are starting to practice what they preach around emissions, curbing emissions, and looking at how the energy sector and the transport sector can actually seriously contribute to that. So I've been looking through and I can't find the plan, but maybe when it gets to Select Committee, because it's essentially a series of small piecemeal measures that, when they all add up, do not add up to a plan. And it's going to be interesting when we get to Select Committee as to what policy initiatives lie behind them, and that's, I think, what certainly I will be asking on the Select Committee. It reminds me, Mr. Speaker, of every time Labor talks about its Future of Work project, which it has just been announced at the weekend, a 2-year project with a good nearly half of the Labor caucus involved, very serious piece of work, joined up piece of work, looking at a major issue. You know, in the next 10 to 15 years, 45% of jobs that exist now in New Zealand are unlikely to exist. It reminds me of what Simon Bridges does every time the Future of Work gets some traction, is that he leaps up and starts talking about driverless pizza delivery cars, and that's somehow something to do with the future of work. Well, we make the point, Mr. Speaker, that we want New Zealanders to be designing to be having the ideas and designing the inventions behind new technology and new ideas in New Zealand, and not be the receivers of pizza through driverless cars, or where our future of work is about the people that make those pizzas. It feels to me very much as if there's a small beer approach being taken by the government on all of these sorts of issues, and it's very much lip service. You can imagine Simon Bridges speaking about this at Cabinet and saying, oh look, you know, let's give it a grand name like energy innovation, and make it sound as if it's something much bigger than it actually is. Well, there is no plan, and that's very disappointing. So that's the first point I want to make, Mr. Speaker. The second point is essentially, in listening to my colleague Sue Moroney talk about the tiny targets of Simon Bridges, and also listening to the Greens talk, particularly Julianne Genter, talking about some of the innovation that's energy innovation to do with transport that's coming out of Norway, and that's just one example, really made me actually go and have a look. And I haven't had much time to do this, but actually, if you want to talk about a plan for energy innovation related to transport, how about this? So Norway is working on a whole series of projects, and I'll give you the names of some of them. The Nordic Sustainable Intelligent Truck Hub, the Nordic comparison on the future of road freight, energy and efficiency and CO2 emissions, the alcohol, spirits and ether as marine fuel project, Nordic sustainable logistics network, sustainable transport through improved actor interface, cleaner city freight transport, Nordic incentives for electric cars, and I think that's where the point that she was making, that there's a lot of, and that's just one project, there's a lot of work happening in Norway on that. The electrifying the seaway, mapping electric fuels statistics, testing the driving range of electric vehicles, and a project called Nordic Electric Avenue. Mr. Speaker, that sounds like a plan to me. That sounds like a major plan where there's been not only a lot of research gone into the different parts of the economy that are impacted, but it's about how Norway is using this kind of research and these kind of innovative projects to build their own IP that they can then offer, that's intellectual property for anyone on the government side who maybe not know what I'm talking about, that they then can offer to the rest of the world and add value to the rest of the world when it comes to CO2 emissions. But instead we've got this little piecemeal piece of legislation coming before us that takes a few measures and puts it in a framework which they call energy innovation. Well, when this, I'm putting the government on notice, when this legislation gets to Select Committee, we'll be asking questions about what analysis has been done about what value what will add to our economy, what are the CO2 emissions that will result from this, how is this being measured back to Labor's commitment, back to the government's commitments, New Zealand's commitment through the Paris Agreement, where does it fit in a wider plan in New Zealand around the emissions, reducing our emissions and what we've signed up to in terms of that. Instead, we've got just a few small things, making changes to ECA's levy funding, and I'm not diminishing these things, but they are not exactly major strategies around energy innovation. Changes to ECA's levy funding, clarifying how electricity industry legislation applies to secondary networks. And if you read the regulatory impact statement, that seems to be its major focus as to what will be the impact on secondary networks and how the legislation needs to take care around that. Well, I'm not diminishing the importance of that. We've got to get things right in legislation. We've got to do things the right way, but it doesn't sound very ground-breaking or earth-shattering when you're thinking as to where this is going to fit in with a wider energy innovation plan. So, and of course, you know, there's creating new road user charge exemptions, enabling electric vehicles to be exempted from road user charges in the same ways that light EVs are, proposing that ECA is able to access funding through petroleum and engine fuels monetary levy and the gas levy, and again going back to that changing, clarifying the application to secondary networks. I'm disappointed. I think the Greens are certainly disappointed, and I'm hoping that they will make a major contribution on the Select Committee as to how we could be doing it better. And I hope that gets through to the New Zealand public, because it's quite frankly embarrassing to be standing in the House this afternoon talking about a bill that is titled the Energy Innovation, Electric Vehicles and Other Matters Amendment Bill, when those other matters could actually be a plan which New Zealand could hold its head up high, show what an innovative nation we are, actually use this piece of legislation to drive our economy and to be developing intellectual property and new inventions and creating new jobs. Instead, it's all a bit pathetic. So we support this bill, but it's a major disappointment.